Recording in progress.
All right, that's pretty cool. Funny thing, I have an option of staying or rushing away immediately. It came up with, do you want to leave?
Yes, don't leave. We got a show to do, Eric. We got to get this
right.
show going. These
We need
people
to
that
tell
are watching
everybody.
us, yeah, they're watching us. They want to know what we're doing, what's going on. So what are we
They
doing,
want,
Eric?
yeah, they want to know what's in the box, and what's in the
Yeah,
box every week is going to be us breaking down different horror classics, behind the scenes information, and anything in between the two. So
yeah,
we're going to look at books and movies, TV shows. We might break down the Freddy Krueger show, or go back to Twilight Zone, or maybe we look at Dark Shadows, pull out some stuff. We're going to look at the people behind the scenes that give us the wonderful covers, design the interiors of the books, the editors, things of that nature, and give the indie and maybe the small press horror world all of the things that we really do love. And most importantly, we're going to look at the things that paved the road for us. The classic books from Dracula to the things that Stephen King put out, and Clive Barker, like we're going to do tonight, and everybody in between. We want to look at the way the movies and the books have shaped and brought us to this point in the history of horror genre.
yeah. And there's definitely a renaissance going right now with horror, and we need to see how we got there. We didn't just start off with splatterpunk and extreme. It's been a long road from Dracula and Frankenstein, coming down from those gothic horrors all the way to today. It's been a long road, and it's nice to break down those older books and movies, and just see where we came from, what the history is. And we'll also be seeing a difference between things that came out in maybe the 70s, 80s, 50s, 60s, who knows what we're going to go over, to today.
Yeah, I can kind of look and see at what point did things shift, at what became acceptable when. Did anything come out previously that everybody hated or despised that we now look back at and say, well, this was groundbreaking. This is the book that paved the way for what we see today. And that'll be fun. I think the idea of going in there and saying, let's look at this book that was written 300 years ago and what made it so great, or what is it that we don't like about something. Not everything that we're going to read are we going to be like, oh, this is great. We're not going to agree with the masses. Maybe we despise some of this stuff, and we're going to get to break it down and talk about it. And hopefully, as we could go through this, people can give their 2 cents and give us different perspectives and different things that we can look at to see as we broaden our horror knowledge.
Yep. And now that everybody knows what we're going to do, we need to introduce ourselves. So I am Donna Latham. I'm an avid reader, reviewer, sometimes author. I'm working to get my words out there to the public.
Okay.
You can
Look at that.
find.
I have it right here.
Oh yeah, look at my filthy poetry book. And I've been enjoying horror for my whole life. I remember watching things like The Howling and The Exorcist as a young child. When I mean young child, I mean like elementary school. My parents never censored what we watched. As long as it wasn't straight up pornography, we were allowed to watch it. So we were able to watch horror, American Werewolf in London. I will always remember that movie. That was a great movie that I saw way back in the day, probably on a VHS tape somewhere or something.
And hopefully one of the things we'll tackle is, that movie and its influence on the genre of, and the werewolf genre and all the other things that come after it.
Yep. All right. So why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. I'm Eric Butler, and I'm a writer. I dabble with the Popelik Massacre, and I put out Dawn, Texas series. Primarily everything I'm going to do is horror. Even if I try and write anything else, it always ends up terrifying and full of gore and everything else. Everything that my wife doesn't want to read is what I'm putting out there. And I'm the same way. I am a child of horror. My father wasn't a fan of horror, and he avoided it at all costs. And for some reason, that piqued my interest, and I dove right in. And I had the same situation. My parents did not really limit anything that if I was interested in watching it or whatever, I had the green light from a very early age. And I've done the same thing as you. So watching horror movies and reading horror stories from, the age of probably 5 or 6 and going up from there. Now, a lot of the stuff I did read were more probably age appropriate horror things when I was that young, but I quickly was into Stephen King. And then from there, of course, the springboard into all the other great stuff that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, now you and I are the same age, I believe. And I think all people our age cut their horror teeth on Stephen King.
Yes, I think you just had no choice. It was Stephen King. I did read a lot of John Bellairs, and that's a child author, but and that's more supernatural gothic horror, so that gave me a taste of that. And I think and we all cut our teeth on Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
So we have that Friday the 13th Stephen King balance of what horror was for us at an early age, and then we kind of all grabbed everything that we could. I don't know too many people who backed away from it when they got that introduction.
Right.
Most of us ran head first into it. So when I was growing up, I was the horror kid. I was the guy that knew everything there was to know at the time. Fangoria magazines, all that stuff. Big into horror, always reading horror. If anybody had a question, I was the guy that they would bug about, the next thing coming out or whatever. And of course, this was before the internet. So if you had any information, it actually was something. Now we can all just look it all up, and it's, we don't even have to store anything. But I remember back in the day, it was a big deal to find some of these movies in the back of the rental places. You couldn't just download videos, and you were lucky if you could come across anything other than Stephen King, maybe some Dean Koontz, but other than, say, the classics, the Frankensteins and the Draculas, it's very difficult to come across anything like that in a bookstore or a library. You just had to have lucky and have to have somebody that worked there that was a fan as well.
Yep, exactly. And it all depends on your geography too, where you were living, because, I remember, I believe you've lived in Germany as well.
Yep.
I don't know the age you were when you were living there, but the last time we lived in Germany, I remember being there, and you really couldn't get horror movies because my parents both liked horror as well. And you really couldn't get any VHS horror from the base movie shop or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until we got back to the States that, because we were in Germany a couple of times, it was like when I was younger. So when we were in the States, we got to see The American Werewolf in London and The Howling and The Shining and all those.
Right. And so the cool thing with that, and I was the same way, because when I was in Germany, I'm born in Germany, and then the second tour I was like 4, and so we were there until I was 7, almost 8. But so there wasn't any. And VHS when I was there wasn't even really a big thing. We had one person in the building that had a VHS player, and we would go and bother that person, knock on their door, and ask if we could watch movies on their VHS player. So when I got back to the States, that was kind of when you would start to see stuff in the stores. But my dad didn't, like I said, watch horror. My mom, of course, isn't a big horror fan. So I unfortunately didn't have anybody to hold, say, we need to watch this movie. So I probably went through a ton of garbage to find some of the classics, because I was just diving in head first trying to find stuff. But
yeah, but even those garbage horror movies were still good.
I'll be honest, those are probably my favorites. So maybe we'll do a good deep dive into that, because I'm a huge fan of the old, Vincent Price stuff and the Hammer horror. And some of those are a little cheesy. And then, you get into the 70s horror that before it got sophisticated. And there are some pretty fun, low budget nightmare movies out there. So.
Yeah, and animated ones too. I mean, the only one I really know that's animated, and it may not even be classified as horror, is Heavy Metal.
Yeah, Heavy Metal is great.
I remember being terrified of certain parts of that, because it was a bunch of different, for those that don't know, Heavy Metal was a skit based on a magazine. It was a movie, and it had different episodes within the movie. I don't know That's all I can think of to
Yeah,
call
it
it.
was like an anthology. It was an
Yeah,
anthology with different styles of animation for each story.
yeah. And the one about the soldiers in the plane with the zombies
Yep.
terrified me.
Yeah,
Absolutely terrified me.
and that was a hidden gem for a long time because they didn't have the rights for the music. So once they produced it, put it out, there was a period of time where you couldn't find that movie anywhere.
Yeah,
And so it was a big deal if you were one of the lucky few to see it at the time.
yeah.
Uh, and that's something else kids don't really, the younger folk today don't really deal with. If it's
Yeah.
on, it's on, and that's it. They've never had to go find some guy at a table that had a copy of a copy of a copy. And for
Of a copy.
$20, you can watch it,
Yeah,
and half the time they won't even sell it to you. You're just going to get to watch it for $20.
yeah,
Yeah, no, and I think that's part of the reason why our generation or people our age or however you want to word it, why we love it as much as we do, because we kind of fought for it.
hmm,
We had to dig and scrape and claw and get our way, get the stuff into our hands so we could even look at it. And there weren't images you could find anywhere. There wasn't any of that stuff. So then I think that's what makes some of the information we're going to talk about interesting is when we start to break down how some of this stuff came to be and the way they approached it, the formats they put stuff in. I think that'll be really fun.
yeah, absolutely. So tonight we're going to be going over one of the classics, getting back to the classics, a newer classic, I guess I could call it, The HellBound Heart by Clive Barker, which it's currently June, and it's Pride Month, so it kind of worked out well because I've been reading all books from LGBTQIA plus community authors, and that just worked out great that we would
Yeah, I thought
be
that was
reading that
funny.
book.
That was funny because it was totally organic. We
Yep.
were going through a whole stack of stuff, and it was almost the luck of the draw. And when it was mentioned, and we were like, let's do this book, shorter book. We can
Yep.
go through it really quick. And then I thought the same thing when we were in the middle of reading it. I was like, oh, okay, this actually fits the month that we're doing it in.
Yep.
So it was just a weird synergy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my experience with Clive Barker isn't that great. I have read Cabal. And the only reason I read Cabal is because I got into watching Nightbreed and I absolutely loved that movie. And then I found out it was a book by Clive Barker. And I like begged my mother to drive me to the bookstore at like 9 o'clock on, at night in a snowstorm to go pick up this one copy of this book that I found at a bookstore. So
Amazon back then.
No Amazon back then. And I tried to read Imagica and I just couldn't get into it. So this was really good for me to get more experience with Clive Barker's writing because I know he has an important role in, horror the way it is today.
My only experience was reading this book. So I've read nothing else by him. And I read this book when I was about 13, like we were talking about earlier. So that would have been like 89.
Yeah.
And it came out in 86. So I read it relatively after it came out. I may have even read it, when I was 12, but that's about the time period I would have jumped into it. So,
yeah. So what did you think? Did the pacing of the book, did it seem slow to you or?
Well, I hated it the first time I read it. And I've always stood by that. I don't like Clive Barker. I read the one book. I hate it. 3-starred it when which isn't a terrible review, but it's not, it's just it's an average book kind of thing. When I did Goodreads on it, but this time I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know if maybe it's because I'm an older person and the different experiences.
We're old, Eric.
And I wonder though if I'm pretty sure the movie came out. Do you think the movie came out in 87 or 80 or 88, 89? I should already know this off the top of my head because we're going to need to know that information. But I'm wondering if I read the book after I saw the movie, and that is a totally different thing. You know, so,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that next week, but I think it may have colored my thought process as a young person. And
Oh yeah,
so
I totally
when
can see how seeing the movie before reading the book could totally, you know, especially being younger, because you're expecting the book to be
yes,
just like the movie.
well, yes, and so it came out in '87. So we're looking at a book that has a copyright of '86. Movie comes out in '87. I saw the movie in '87, '88. I must have read the book '88, '89. So when I go into this book, I'm thinking I'm basically reading this movie again.
Yeah.
Um, and so that right there, I think, completely ruined the experience for me at the time as an immature reader. Because I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. Yes, I'm reading something way above my age or whatever, but I was, you know, mature enough to read it, but maybe not mature enough to process the difference between the two.
Yeah.
I thought it was the right length. I didn't think. I think if he would have tried to stretch a few more words out of it, we would have got bored.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure. Yeah,
I do think
I
he had a
agree.
good pace to it. I thought the character, you know, I didn't find any of the characters likable. And I didn't really find myself rooting either way for anybody. So I mean that is one thing, and who knows, that may be his skill. Maybe I haven't read any, like I said, I haven't read any of his other stuff. That may be what he does. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
uh,
wouldn't know that. And as I was reading it, I was thinking about the setting, the world that it was built in, and it was kind of to me um, a blank world, like a
yeah,
generic world.
I
Like
think
there were no indicators of what country it was in. I mean, there were maybe, I don't remember, but there may have been some like terms that were used because I believe he is from the UK.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so there may have been some terms that, you know, clued me in that, okay, we're talking about people in the UK. So it was kind of like a generic world, which I think really worked for this story, because the focus was to be on the Cenobites and Frank's story. And I think leaving the world to be so generic, you know, you didn't know where it was. Yes, there were like street names, but that was pretty much it.
I found
Um,
that it could have easily been in England, like London, you know, one of their more posh districts, or it could have been like Baltimore. You
yeah.
know what I mean? It felt like that. It kind of, I immediately pictured in my head high rises or what are those things called? You know, those really expensive neighborhoods where they have, you know, three or four houses kind of together, and
Oh,
then
right.
those kind
Yeah.
of neighborhoods. I kind of pictured that when they were moving into that new, you know, when they moved in. But you're right. There's nothing that makes me, I didn't feel like, I didn't feel like any of the setting mattered except for that room. And
Yes.
I thought he was brilliant in doing that because the only thing that really mattered was what was going on in that room beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I said I was going to do it. I haven't done it yet. Spoiler alert, we're actually going to talk about the book. So if you haven't read the book and you're going to get upset about stuff, just know after, you know, this point on, we may deep dive and tell you we're going to talk about the whole thing. So we want to make sure that you know that beforehand. So I guess we already dropped the ball on that. I already said before
Yeah.
we started I was going to
Whoops.
say it over and over again. But
Yeah.
no, let's back to the setting. I thought that was perfect. And the only thing I didn't like is, and as you said, you know, the focus on Frank and the Cenobites. I didn't think they focused enough on that. I wish they would have done a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that might have been why I didn't like it when I read it when I was younger, because those they're so larger than life on the screen, and then in the page, maybe a little bit more left to your imagination.
Right.
Which, if you were reading it from a blank slate, then yeah, that might be pretty cool. But if you've already seen the movie, the poster, or anything about the movie, now you're starting to get an idea of what's, you know, a visual representation has already been put there, and so you're immediately leaning towards that as you're reading. But you don't really get that feeling when you get through the description and stuff.
Yeah. The one thing that bothered me about the book is the character of Kirsty. It didn't bother me that her role was different than it is in the movie. What bothered me is you really don't know who she is in relation to Rory. Like,
Right.
Julia's his wife and Frank's his brother, and the
Yeah,
moving people and the colleagues that come over for the party that they had.
I think they did. He did a poor job, but I mean, obvious. Well, I don't know, obvious, but I got to the point where she is the, he's the one that got away, and she's the one sitting there hoping that she gets to break the glass in case of emergency. She's hoping
Yeah,
to be that.
yeah.
But
But
he
he
didn't
seemed,
do a good job. You're
yeah,
right. He did not do a good job of making us see, because in Rory's eyes, she was nothing more than, I don't even know if she was a friend in his eyes, the way he
yeah.
wrote her.
Well, so Julia had described her as a young girl that Rory, I think the phrase was, took under his wing.
Right. So
So
that
she
almost
was,
makes it feel like a business, like a
yeah,
work
or like a
environment.
student.
Right. Did
So
they ever say what Rory did?
no,
Okay.
you don't know what Rory did. And so I was really confused, but then she was close enough to Rory for him to call her and say, "Hey, can you go and check on Julia?"
Yeah.
But who is this girl? Like, is she a student? Is she a niece?
Yeah. So it's got to, well, she has, well, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter because the way that they table it in the, and maybe that's why they changed it for the movie. But
Yeah,
yeah, I didn't get the family vibe. I got the jilted, I would say jilted lover, but it's not even that case. It's not it's the infatuated stalker is what it
yeah.
is.
But
And
she's not
maybe,
really a stalker because they're like, "Hey, come over and come to
oh
this
yeah, yeah, yeah.
party."
She's one of those
So
stalkers that somehow ingrained herself into their lives,
yeah,
but not in a way that creeps you out.
yeah.
Some
But I'm
people
like,
have that talent.
yeah. So I'm just like left with, how the hell does she even know Rory? Like,
I
where
would,
did
you're
she
right.
come from?
They needed to have done a much better job of explaining what he does and how he knew her, and
Yeah,
it doesn't come across. And again, when you watch the movie, it kind of plays into it, so you have an idea in your head. And so it was interesting to see how he played the character in the book, but and maybe that's it. Maybe that's the genius of the character, is that she is such a mouse that everything she does at the end of the second half of the book is out of character.
right, right,
Because the character that we're introduced to at the housewarming, she is not aggressive. She's not. She's 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 not going to be the character that's going to um, be the downfall of Frank. But
right.
by the end of this, and not only that, she's met Frank before, and so she's somebody who's been in their lives way longer than, so maybe she was a student when Rory, like maybe Rory was a senior and she was a sophomore situation, something like that. Because if
Yeah,
you think about it, because she makes a couple comments where she acts like she ran into Frank, she knows Frank's attitude, the way he talks to people, the way he uses people,
yeah.
his
And
the
she was,
sexuality nature.
yeah, and she was there during their wedding, Julia and Rory's wedding. So she's been in their lives for years.
And Julia knew enough to know that she has a thing for her husband, but she was completely not perplexed by it or threatened. She did
Right.
not see her as a threat at all.
No.
So that almost makes you feel like childhood friend as they grow up, maybe, or
But
something of
yeah,
that
but
nature.
then in my mind, I see Rory and Julia as older. I
Yeah.
don't know why. Maybe it's the influence of the movie. And I see Kirsty as younger. Again, maybe it's influence of the movie.
Well, and I think you're right because it's the way they write her. They write
Yeah,
the other two as sophisticated adults
yep,
moving into a house, throwing this party, doing all this stuff. They're very sexual. They're very in your face about things. They're very aggressive about things. And then they have this girl who is almost virginal in every aspect
Yeah.
and is very, very timid and mousy about everything, and needs to have alcohol to open up to a point where she's comfortable enough to maybe kind of broach some subjects, or get enough courage up to not experiment, but to explore the house.
Right.
It wasn't until she got really to the point where she let that guy get her super drunk so that she could be comfortable enough to stay. So, I
Right.
mean, they have all these weird aspects of this girl's character. But yeah, yeah, when you read it, you're looking at a couple of adults in their 30s, mid 30s maybe, and a 20-something-year-old person chasing after Rory.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. That might be, that's one of the things. Maybe that's why they changed it so drastically for the movie.
I mean, they would have had to, because there's no way that could have played out on screen.
Yeah, I don't know how they would have been able to do it. Now, he doesn't have a problem. Barker doesn't have a problem of making people uncomfortable. And
Right.
we're talking about 86. So if somebody reads this and goes, "Oh, this is pretty tame," no, this is pretty adventuresome. This is pretty aggressive for 86. I
Right.
mean, I don't know. I mean, of course, there's going to be literature that is harder. There's going to be literature, but this was considered mainstream horror. This wasn't like, a guy printing copies of a zine somewhere, and you might be able to get a copy, underground. Stephen King was pushing this as the next thing of horror. So this was pretty adventuresome, some of the topics that they were getting into, and some of the, because I mean, you have the feeling of, and I guess, and this is where the movie kind of bleeds into the book when you're reading it, because there are some themes in the movie that are pretty, um, that stand out as horrifying for the time period. But I thought he tackled some of it really well.
Yeah. I mean, all in all, I enjoyed the read. I'm not ever going to say it's the best thing I've ever read in my life.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there.
Yeah. It wasn't horrible. It was a lot of, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just a lot of genericness. You have the generic setting, world, the generic characters of Kirsty. The only things that weren't really generic was the room where Frank was.
Yeah, and
And
even maybe
I
Frank himself.
yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense because that is the focus. That's where all the action is supposed to happen, I guess.
Right. And you know what? I
Um,
said that and immediately said, no, that's not right. Frank is generic too. Frank
yeah,
is a generic villain in this story. There's nothing unique about Frank at all. Frank is 100% the villain of the story in a way that we've seen villains over and over again.
yeah.
There was
And yet,
nothing about him that was, you know what? You're right. I don't know. The most unique thing are the Cenobites, and
yep,
they barely got anything going on in the book.
yeah. I wish we would have gotten more, what's the word I'm looking for? Introduction, more description or interaction. That's the word I'm looking for. More interaction with the engineer.
Yeah,
Because
that
they
would have been
made it,
nice.
yeah, the three were like, oh, the engineer, and they kind of were like, the way I read it, a lot of respect and maybe a little fear they had, the Cenobites, for the engineer. So it would have been nice to be able to see, read and see more of that character, more interaction with that character, because the only thing we ever got was when Julia's head was in her lap and he says to Kirsty, "I'm the engineer," and then she runs out of the house.
Yeah, in fact, I made a note about the head in the lap being, or Julia, yeah, Julia in the dress. I put that as my least favorite part. It just felt almost unnecessary.
Yeah,
Like he got to the point where he's like, you know what, I haven't done enough. Let me do this last little bit, and then that'll be my shock thing. Uh,
yeah.
and and then I made a note that my favorite part. Let's see. Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, my favorite part was it was one of the times that the Cenobites were interacting with Christie, in the second half of the story. Which, you know what, maybe the problem is they spent so much time setting up these characters
Hmm.
and none of them are likable. So therefore we don't care what happens to them. Because
Yeah.
you don't care that Rory's in this loveless marriage. Because he's kind of a whiny, um, almost like a milksop character.
Hmm.
We don't care about Frank because he's not. He's just the villain. He's just the guy. He's the ever hungry sexual desire. The representation of that. That's all that is. And then, um, I was Julia likable at all? She seemed to be about the worst of all three of them.
Yeah, she definitely was.
And
She
so the
did.
only character that we're supposed to really like is Christy, and we're only supposed to like her because we feel sorry for her, not because she's got any redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
Now, I say that, but then we get to the second half of the book, and she starts to show us that she does have some redeeming qualities. She stands up for herself. She's able to do some of the things that we kind of wish she would have done with Julia and Rory. And if she would have done that to begin with, there we wouldn't have even had the story.
Yeah.
But she's the only one to show a backbone to the Cenobites. She stood up to all of them, makes a deal with them, does all the things that she does.
Hmm.
Um, at the end, maybe she's a likable character, but during that beginning part, I found all of them to be pretty unlikable, and so it didn't bother me that they were all gonna
Right. I
have
mean,
issues.
yeah, she was. I got kind of mad at her at some point, Kirsty, because there was a point where Julie was like, "Oh, go make us some tea," and
Yeah,
she's like, "Okay."
and you know what? That might be one of the parts that tells you where they are. That's a very British thing to do,
Yeah.
is to have somebody
Yeah.
make tea in your house. Kind of makes them feel like they're the servant to you. You sent them off to do something when, as the host, you should be doing it.
Right.
If you can get
Right.
somebody else to do it, then now you're lording over them or showing your power, I guess is what he was trying to show. So I mean, it just made her even mousier.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
she scurries away and does what she's told.
Yeah.
Um,
I just, Clive Barker, if you're watching this ever, please reach out and let me know who the hell is Kirsty to these people.
yeah, I know that, and now that you say it like that, because you know what I did, the entire time I'm reading it, all I think about is the character from the movie, and I go, well, she's not that, but she's something similar. But it just kind of slides into place, and maybe it's not important, maybe we don't need to know, and that's what he's trying to tell us, that she's not. But I mean, she's too important to the story to not know some of the backstory. So
Yeah.
um
I mean, like I said, you have, you don't know what Rory does. You don't know what Julia does, but you know that Rory and Julia are married. You know that Frank's the brother. I believe I said this as we started talking. Um, and then there's the colleagues that come over for the party, but there's just zero explanation for Kirsty.
Now when the colleagues come over for the party, though, don't they know Kirsty?
They
Because
do.
they do. So we have to assume that she is a colleague as well, but just maybe in an intern because of the age difference. If we did it,
Yeah.
maybe she's an intern at the company. But then you have to try and tie it into how the hell did she go to the wedding? And how did she meet Frank and all that and stuff. So it almost feels like a child or a college relationship that didn't take,
Yeah.
where one side is after the other, but the other side doesn't know that they exist. And then maybe it rolls into their professional lives. But even at that point, it's got to be a case of freshman senior because the age difference does seem to be. Or it could simply be that she's just that mousy. Maybe she's the same age, or maybe she's even older
Yeah.
and she's just that mousy of a character.
I don't know.
Now,
I don't know.
normally when we do this, we're going to have 10, 11 questions that we will answer as we're reading the books. And then when we'll do the discussion, we'll just kind of have it just out there, just for everybody to know. Was there anything that stood out of those 11 questions to you that you wanted to focus on specifically?
Um, I think we covered a lot. I definitely don't think it needed another chapter.
Yeah.
It was sufficient.
You know what I'd
Um,
like? I would have liked 2 or 3 less chapters at the beginning and let's slap some stuff on the end and fill out some of the Cenobite stuff.
Yeah, I really did like the beginning because it did a lot to explain the cube.
Okay, yeah, and I don't mean like the very beginning.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking that Rory moving in, and I get it. I get why all of it's there. He writes a good story. He knew what we needed to know to get from A to B. I guess we just wanted more information than he was willing to give us at the time. Now, the real question is in 1986, and we sit down to read this with no idea of anything, and we're just reading this book, I kind of feel like maybe we're blown away by it. That maybe we're like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to know more about these characters. And that we look forward to the next book. But today we read it, and I wonder if we're like, okay, yeah, this is well written. It's a story. I like his style, but I'm not sure I'm blown away by the characterization of everything.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the problem. It's because we've read so many incredible things between when it came out and when we're reading it now. If maybe it isn't kind of like, it's cutting edge when it came out, but now it's old hat kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. In 1986, this book coming out, there's a lot of sex references. A lot of pain and sex.
S&M was not something people talked about in the 80s, and not.
No,
and
definitely
if they did,
not.
It was never in a positive way.
Right.
And Clive Barker was cutting edge when it came to sexual situations in his writing and opening the door for people to realize that there were all these different things out there, the different kinks, for lack of a better word or whatever.
Yeah. And that's one thing I did get from the beginning part is, clearly Frank was thinking this was going to be some S&M type thing.
Definitely. He thought, I don't know what he thought it was going to be. Like, I mean, it seemed like at that point he had done everything that he possibly could do to get aroused, and that he was looking for the next thing. I don't know what he thought it was going to be, especially when the doorway opens and you're looking at the Cenobite.
Yeah, right.
How could you not immediately go, I've made a mistake, and try to get out of it? Of course, by that time, well,
it's too late.
Is that true? Is it too late? Because didn't they offer Kirsty a way out, or did she immediately just pivot and try and sell them Frank? Because it seemed like they were going to let Kirsty go.
Yeah, I don't know.
She opened the box to get them to come to turn in Frank, didn't she? That's what it felt like. Unless I've gone brain dead in a week. So if that's the case, then it almost feels like they might have told Kirsty, you made a mistake, you don't have to come. But if you accept the journey, you're going through the whole thing, which is what Frank ended up doing.
Right.
But I wonder if, and that would have been, that would have been 50 Shades of Grey kind of shocking in 86. Especially because we're not talking about indie horror. We're not talking about a guy that just wrote a book and put it on Amazon and hopes that people buy it. This was a guy that Stephen King was trumpeting to the world. You have to read this guy. This is what he's doing. This is cutting edge. This is the stuff. So, bazillions of people were getting into this, I guess it's a novella. When you call it a novella, it's not very long.
Yeah, it was like what, 146 pages?
Yeah.
If that. Something like that.
It's hard to tell with the Kindle. I read mine on Kindle.
So did I.
If anybody's interested, you can read it for free on Kindle if you have Prime.
Yep.
Which I thought was pretty cool. And I think we're gonna get an opportunity to see a lot of cool books that way, of the classics, because that's one of the fun things about classic horror. A lot of them are going to be available for everyone to read, and they don't have to pay if they're interested in just checking it out and reading it with us.
Yeah. Now I know there's several covers to this book.
Yes, let's see if I can pull that up. And that's something else we want everyone to know. That we're going to try, and when we discuss a book, we're going to try and pull up 3 to 5 covers that they've used over time to see which covers we think would have sold the book, completely failed to sell the book, and show people how important covers actually are to a book. And then we were going to go back and talk to cover artists and get their 2 cents on the whole process as well. But I think it's a very important aspect to the whole thing, especially I know they say it with thumbnails and stuff. I don't find it as it's not the same when I'm scrolling online and I see a cover. I never had that same reaction I do when I saw a cover on a bookshelf. I
Right.
don't know if it's the same for
Yeah.
you, but that
Yeah.
was always like, oh my God, what is this? And you immediately grab it and
Hmm.
you check it out. But because sometimes you'll see the cover and you'll see all the other covers too. It's not as big a deal. But let's see.
I am 100% judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, I am too. And um, I'm more likely to judge your book by its cover than I am to judge it by any of the mistakes on the interior.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not going to hold you hostage over commas or maybe some grammatical issues or misspellings, because I'm pretty sure when we were reading Hellraiser on the Prime version, I'm pretty sure I came over a typo.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, I mean, even here's a book that's been looked over a bazillion times, edited probably by scores of people. This is probably the 10th or 11th version of this book, and there's still typos in there. So,
Hmm.
but the cover itself is going to be the thing that we really need to look at. Let me see. I opened it up. Here we go. Okay, so let me show. Let's see. I think everybody. It says when I go to share it, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I guess you need to turn that on.
Oh,
And hopefully everybody will be patient as we learn how to do things. Now I've looked. All right, so this is the new cover. At least the cover you're going to get with the Kindle version.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty cool, but it also tells us that they've seen the movie.
Right. Right. You definitely definitely know that this is
and I
from
guess
a
that's part of
movie.
the sales point now, right? Is that they're going to focus on the main character of the movie that's so popular and has spawned all the stuff. So they're going to do it, and they're doing it in a way that isn't 100% based off the movie. I mean, it is showing us 90% of the character without actually doing the full thing. Now, I do like the font choices they have on this one. And I think if I would have saw this cover on a bookshelf, that I would have at least picked it up to check it out.
Yeah, I would have picked it up. I don't think it would have been one that I would see across the room and run over
Right.
and
No, I'm
ignore
totally with
everything
you.
in the stacks.
And I don't think it'd be one where I'd pick it up and say, Donna, check this out. I
Yeah.
don't see it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good. They're definitely using a play on the character that everybody's familiar with.
And today, this approach seems to be what everybody's doing, and it's driving me crazy. This minimalistic, I'm almost shocked they put a picture. I'm surprised they didn't just have words on it and a couple colors. And that's what covers have become. That's kind of why I really enjoy the throwbacks to the horror books from the 80s, 90s. There's some amazing covers, 70s for sure. Give me a die cut cover any day of the week. Pictures and on pictures. So, but this is decent. I mean, it at least gives you an idea what you're getting into.
Right. This does drive me crazy though with the different fonts, because you've got this font where it says, the title of the book, and then the author's name is in a different font, and then
now almost everybody that does cover art, and I will tell you that you should have the different fonts for those two things, but I totally agree they're too different in my mind. They could have, not only that though, those two fonts, and then I see like 3 or 4 more fonts. That's I totally agree with that.
It's almost like a magazine. Someone cut words out of a magazine and pasted it onto.
It reminds me of when I took I'm a history major with the English Lit minor, and I took a marketing class just to take a class with a friend, and this reminds me of the marketing class where they think they know what to do, and so they tell you this is how everybody's doing it, and so therefore you must do it, but they're missing the point. They're not, they're cutting off their nose in a way. So I feel you on the whole font thing.
All right, what's next?
Okay,
So
now
you
this
said,
is the cover for the narration. So if you were to get the audio book,
yeah,
and nothing about this makes me want to read it, other than I
yeah,
kind of know that that's supposed to be Pinhead. And
yeah.
again, what did they do? They're giving us the movie icon. They're not
Hmm.
giving us because do you remember Pinhead in this one at all? I mean, I don't remember them really describing Pinhead himself.
Um, yeah, they did, but there was no, it wasn't like a huge focus.
Right. I mean, it was just
It's
like an
almost as,
afterthought.
yeah, it's almost that Cenobite was not the main one,
It
almost.
it was the one that had the wire that goes in her throat
The
thing.
the
She was,
female
yeah,
one,
she's the one
yeah,
that seemed to be the most prominent. But
yeah,
you didn't get the feel of the way they have Pinhead set up in the movies. You don't get that
yeah,
feel in the book. At least I didn't.
yeah. This guy looks like a butcher to
Yeah, I
me.
was thinking a butcher or a blacksmith.
Yeah,
And we're about to read something that happened in, the 1500s.
yeah.
Something crazy. So this right there, that's a total nothing. Now this must have come out after the movie, but
Hmm.
I enjoy all the aspects to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is a
This
beautiful
is a
cover.
classic.
Yeah,
As I lean forward to see all the cool little pictures. I mean, just the fact that they took all the time to do each one of these, and then you have the main characters in the larger
hmm,
circles. You've got the box at the top, which is important. You can see the lustfulness of the story itself with the two people in front of Pinhead, but
right.
casting him in the color of Pinhead kind of lets you think that all that ties together, which is an interesting idea. And more importantly, what is that thing underneath Pinhead?
Yeah,
That's pretty
um,
cool.
yeah. I don't remember any kind of creature of that nature in either the book or the movie. So
Right. So it makes you wonder, maybe there's something there that, yeah, maybe it's just supposed to be a demon and we're just supposed to, fixate the two, hell and the Cenobites. Although, I mean, I guess after all this time, it's already been discussed by other writers and things of that nature. I'm sure it's just supposed to be another dimension, not
yeah,
really
I
hell
mean,
itself.
maybe they just needed something to fill the space.
But they picked something really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and I would have picked this book up just almost on that.
Hmm.
You combine him being skinned up here on the top corner, the monster at the bottom, Pinhead, and of course you're gonna know that
Yep.
who Pinhead is because of the thing. This cover right here this might be my favorite cover of the five that we're gonna look at. Although this is a really cool cover too. I
This
don't know when
one,
this one came out.
yeah, I don't know, but this one I think would have to be my favorite. Um,
Yeah,
it's
it's
got
pretty
that,
cool.
yeah, it's got that classic vintage horror 80s. I know it's not a zebra book, but it makes me think of those zebra
Yeah.
books from the 80s. Um, it has nothing to do with the movie
It
because that,
really doesn't. Maybe it's supposed to represent when his skin slides off a little bit at the end, he's kind of got the
yeah,
bloody skinny marks. But yeah, you're right. It's
yeah,
just it's just intense and
yeah, it's just a
terrifying.
terrifying image. The fonts for the title and the author name are the same, they look to me. So that's very pleasing to my eyes,
Yeah,
you know?
but you can see they broke it up with a different font
Yeah,
to so they're still doing that trick. Whatever it is that somebody told somebody long ago that you have to have two or three fonts on a cover. They're doing it, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't make you want to pull your hair out.
right.
And you know what? I think when I look at this cover, this is more, like you said, classic horror. That other one, the more I think about it, it reminds me of the old fantasy covers from the
Hmm.
80s. And maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe they were trying to pull in some of
It
that.
it actually has a similar feel to me to Magica.
Yeah.
So kind of probably the same artist did that one as Magica, um, because it kind of reminded me just the color scheme. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
it was kind of pastels to me.
Maybe it was
Um,
the Easter edition of Hellraiser. I don't
Yeah.
know.
All right. So this is the last one here. This was
This is the
actually,
original, I
is
think.
this the original?
Yeah, because this is the copy I've got. And
Yeah.
I got mine in 87, I think. Like I
Oh,
said,
wow. Yeah.
like I bought, this is the, yeah, that's so funny. I'm gonna have a ton of books that I bought when I was 12 or 13. I still have most of them.
Yeah.
I held, even though I didn't like it, I held on to it because I never know when I'm gonna want to go back and reread stuff.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure this was the first, and maybe not the very first. Maybe this was the one that they put out when they were really starting to. Well, look right there. You can see at the top it says the novella that inspired the film Hellraiser. So
Right.
it probably came out the year that the movie came out without
Mhm.
using any of the stuff. But I like this one the most because it doesn't have any reference to Pinhead on it.
Right. This was actually the cover because I read it on Kindle. This was the cover on my Kindle.
Oh, was
And I'm
it?
like, yeah. And I was expecting the first one we saw, the black and white skull with the pins.
Yeah.
But it was this cover, and it wasn't. I don't have a color. I have a paper white, so I really couldn't see much. But I absolutely love this because if you look, it looks like they're held up by like cloth, but it's clearly meant to be tendons.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
you've got him skinned and laying down.
mhm.
But then if you look at it going up, then you start to see all the other pieces that he's
Yeah,
got
and you know
going
what?
on.
Now that you just said that, I noticed that it is Frank laying down upside down, and the mouth is on the guy's chest.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't even notice that until you started saying it.
The level of detail on this cover is amazing.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
and then so I guess, do you think those four things are the Cenobites? Or is that just supposed to represent the pleasure, pain, or whatever? And then
I don't know.
and because they're obviously, holding up the body, but then I think at the same time you're also supposed to see that as a heart,
Hmm.
with the way he's got his arms and everything. So it's so many different levels that this artist was able to capture and give us so many things, and he didn't need to slap Pinhead on there, and
Right. Or
especially
the
at this,
cube.
yeah. And you know what? I'd be okay with the cube because that is a very important part of the story. And you're right. I wish they would have gone a little bit more into that too. That would have been pretty cool. Although it took what, four movies? Was it the fourth movie when they finally go back in time and show the guy building the box? I
I
think it's
don't
the
even
fourth.
remember.
I think it's the fourth or fifth movie. So you don't even really know much about the box in the first three. Um,
Yeah.
but like I said, we're going to discuss the movie next week and kind of compare and contrast between the two. So maybe we'll have some more information on all that stuff.
Yeah. But I definitely think this is my, along with you, I think this is my favorite cover. Even though I like the one with it looked like a zombie on it, the 80s feel,
Yeah.
just because there's so much to look at.
Yeah, and as
And
I'm looking at it more, I'm looking at my copy, and what's really cool is the copy I have is embossed. So then you can see the parts that they wanted you to, they have different layers and levels and stuff. And then so you can kind of see what they're trying to get you to focus on a little bit differently than just the other side. Because like if you look at I don't even know if we can see it. If you look at the back, you
oh
can
yeah,
see
yep.
all they show is his eyes and his mouth and his head.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the front, you got all that amazing stuff too. Um, yeah, I think you're right. I think this is, and look at the fonts. It looks
Yep.
like it's the same. They're different sizes, of course, and then they've got the other information in a different font to catch your eye, which is I think kind of smart. Yeah, I think you're right. This is the best one of
Yeah.
all of them. Although I really do like that fantasy one just because it's so interesting. They have so many aspects. But if I go back and I think about it, is it really that interesting if I haven't read the book? Um, because half of the pictures I was excited about seeing because they were representations of things I knew happened. But
Right.
as somebody who hasn't, if I hadn't read it, maybe I'm thinking that monster's cool at the bottom, the box is interesting, and maybe Pinhead's interesting. But I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm definitely not as excited about seeing Frank in the corner, Julia across from him, because I don't know who those people are. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And
And
I
there was
think,
some lizard type monster
yeah,
in
I
one of
saw
the
that
circles
too.
on the left. And I'm
I
like, what is
assume
that?
that must be something to do with Hell too, but I'm not sure. And now, of course, we know that I'm pretty sure Barker wasn't a religious person, but he probably grew up in a religious household. And this is probably what he started picturing hell as being, maybe when he started coming up with the idea of the box opening and these
Yeah.
creatures coming out. Because, it seems like when it gets down to it, Frank is being punished because of his sexual nature.
Hmm.
He's being punished for his sins, even though he thinks he's initially being rewarded or going to go on a special journey with these
Right.
things. In the end, it turns out it feels like he's being punished, and maybe that's what Barker was going through at the time, or when he came up with the idea. Maybe he felt like in his lifestyle or his, the way people viewed gays in the 80s, maybe he was thinking on that kind of plane of existence or whatever, and that's how he came up with that idea.
Right.
It was cutting. I really do think in '86 this probably blew some minds. I'm gonna have to go back and look and see if there's anything from back then, maybe some articles or something that talks about it. But now it's old hat. I mean,
Hmm.
we have Slob, and we have
Hopelick Massacre.
only psychos. I
Yep.
mean, Carver's got stuff. Um, it's not. I mean, Ed Lee, Richard Lehman,
Yeah.
Jack Ketchum. I
Triana.
mean, yeah, they're just heads and tails above the stuff that was coming out in the 80s when it comes to that kind of material. But
Right.
if you don't have this book and you don't have somebody saying, hey, look at this, you can do this, you can talk about this, then maybe we don't have these people because they don't talk about it. They don't
All right.
go. So, and then that's why I think because we're really going to learn as we do it, is that how many doors a simple, silly little horror book is going to open for other people.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, would a book just about S&M taken off in '86 if it wasn't bound with all the horror elements to it? I don't know
Yeah,
if it would have. It wouldn't have been mainstream enough. You're not
definitely
gonna
not.
there wouldn't
Yeah.
have been housewives and college. Maybe I don't know. Maybe people in college would have. I don't know.
Yeah, the housewives were busy reading their bodice rippers.
Yeah. So I just feel like I do feel like at the time this was opening doors and showing us a different view of things that maybe people were hesitant to discuss.
Yeah.
But when you compare it to some of the stuff you can read today that's been out, even just the last year, it does come across as a little soft. But I'll tell you the one thing I really did like, I liked his style. I thought he wrote a very smooth story,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and so I didn't feel like I was struggling to get through it, which leads me to one of our final questions. Um, would you read another book by him? And I definitely, I'd like to see another book by him, and maybe one of the collections, Books of Blood, and we can kind of break down multiple stories, because short story writing and novellas versus novels, those are all different animals. And
Hmm.
if he can capture, I think even if he can capture what he captured in this novella into a short story, um, maybe that's his area of specialty. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know some of his books are quite long and they intimidate me. Like I had said previously, I tried to read a Magica and I just couldn't. Maybe I was too young or just it, I don't know. Um, I'm not gonna say I will never read anything by Parker ever again. I do want to read Books of Blood. That's been on my radar for a while.
Right.
So yeah, you know, if the right book comes along, if the opportunity presents itself, I will definitely read another Barker
So
book.
maybe, or maybe we just take out um, the stories that inspired the movies.
Mm,
Maybe we just cull the rest of it and just see what does Candyman read like. Because I know Candyman's completely different. So
yeah,
maybe he's one of these writers where you get two completely different experiences between the two.
yeah.
the movie and the book, especially because he's very handsy usually when it comes to the movies. And we'll see that next week when we discuss Hellraiser.
Yeah, fun fact, I have my TV on just for background noise, and I was watching the most recent Candyman that had come out. I mean, I was obviously not watching it because I've been talking with you, but it's just been playing in the background. So just a fun little, I had some Clive
Perfect.
Barker on the TV, and
Yeah,
I'm
he's
talking
everywhere
about,
now. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm with you. I am interested in reading more, but I'm not moving anything up.
yeah,
It's not going to knock anything down for now. I have a TBR pile that's growing daily, but it's not going to have Barker pushing to the top. I'm not to the point where I'm like, this needs to be, this is something I have to have
yeah,
immediately in my life. That
yeah.
said, I recommend everybody check it out because
Mhm.
I think it is a good book. I think it's a good read, and it's just short enough that I don't think it's going to take too much of your time.
Right.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting idea. I do like, you know what I wish? I wish the next one, or maybe the next one I will try and find is got more information on the Cenobites because I know he has done another one or two that has more information. But we'll have to
That
deep
would be
dive
good.
just into that.
Yeah.
So maybe he got the hint that they were the things that he needed to write more about. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we pretty much said all we need to say about Hellraiser. It wasn't the most fantastic book. It wasn't the worst book.
Yeah, I'd probably
Um,
give it 4 stars. I'm gonna bump it up from my 3-star review because my 3-star review was like 2.5 stars rounded up.
yeah.
I think I'll bump it up to 3.75, maybe 4.
Yeah.
Give it
Yeah, I
that.
think I'm
And
similar. Yeah.
and it's not because it's a bad story, not because he's he's a bad writer, but just because I don't know, it didn't feel unique or new, or it didn't catch my attention.
Yeah.
As much is better than I remember it being, but I'm not sure it is something I'm going to go run out and tell everybody in the streets they have to read this book.
Yeah. And speaking of telling people in the streets about books, another segment that we're going to be doing is the book of the week. And it's a book that we think people should be reading. It'll usually be an indie author. It's the not Stephen King book of the week. Is
Yes.
what we'll call it.
And we'll get
Um,
some, we'll try and come up with some production for that.
yeah. Yeah, so my pick is a book that I honestly just came across by total accident. I was on Thrift Books. I don't know if you've shopped Thrift Books, but it gives you like suggestions when you're like searching for books. And I just saw this book, and I'm like, I read the synopsis and I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty interesting. The book is Rushed by Brian Harmon. It is horror, but I think it's a lot of dark fantasy too. But it is considered horror. And spoiler alert, if you have not read it, Eric keeps having these dreams that he needs to go somewhere. He just has this compulsion that he needs to get in his car and start driving. And he fights it. Sometimes he'll actually be in his car and the car will be turned on, and his wife will come out and be like, "What are you doing?" And he'll go back in the house. And just one day he decides, you know what, I'm just going to get in my car and I'm going to see what happens. So he goes, and he actually ends up being going on this incredibly weird, deranged journey in an alternate, I'm not going to say world. It's like an alternate reality. So there's like these disgusting creatures that he comes across. There is actually quite a bit of humor in this book. There's this hilarious scene on the river with these like ape-like creatures. And I'll never forget it. I was laughing so hard because they're like throwing things at each other, Eric and these ape-like creatures. And then he ends up just like giving them the middle finger as he's like paddling away. It was hilarious. He comes to, in part of his journey, he comes across this young girl who was actually killed, and her spirit is trapped in a house. And she ends up being like his spirit guide, and he communicates with her on his cell phone. So she can access anybody's phone anywhere, and she'll just like call him up and say, hey, I think something's going to happen. It's an amazing, it's actually a series.
I was going to ask you that if it was a one shot or if it was part of a group. Is this the first one of that group?
Yeah, that's the first one of the group. I've only read up to the third, but I believe there's 9 books in the series.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
It sounds great. It sounds funny. I love
Yeah.
it when the writer can put some humor into the thing and it's not just one note. So
yeah.
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, you have pretty much everything in this book. You have like fantastical creatures and magic and ghosts, and it's horror and it's fantasy and there's humor. And the main character, Eric, he's like, I believe he's like a high school teacher, if I'm remembering correctly. So he's not like some super ghost hunter, demon slayer person.
Somebody we can relate to.
Exactly. So it's just hilarious. And it's such a great book. Brian Harmon has another series out, The Hands of the Architect, which I have the first book in the series. I just haven't read it yet. And he also has another series, The Temple of the Blind, which I have not read.
Well, I will put the links, below.
Yeah.
For all of the books of the week when we do it, and also anything else that we have that's important that you guys need to look at. But always look in the links for the book that we recommend for the week, because we're going to try and recommend books that you may not know anything about or never heard of, because we really do want to get some eyes on people that haven't had some of the same opportunities or whatever.
Yeah, and I reached out to Brian Harmon back when Carver Pike started doing First Chapter Freak Show, because I never see his books mentioned in Books of Horror. I've been in Books of Horror group for like almost 2 years now, and I think I've come across one other person who's read books by this author.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to Brian Harmon, and I was like, hey, I have this author friend who's doing this show where he reads the first chapter and of your book, and here's his information if you're interested, reach out to him. But I follow Brian Harmon's page on Facebook, but he's not very active in social media. So I'm like, I just never see anybody talk about this book, and I absolutely loved it.
Well, right there sells it for me. So we need to get people out there and check it out.
Yeah.
Is it ebook only, or was there a paperback?
Oh no, it's paperback too.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
And yeah, he's already got 9 for that series. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that. That we get an entire world. It's not just a one-off.
Yeah.
So I think that's always impressive when people can put up that kind of stuff. Especially since you said he has 3 going, so he's probably writing them at the same time,
Right.
He's kind of layered them or whatever, but that's really cool. So Brian Harmon.
Yep.
I will put, like I said, I'll put the link below, and then we'll be able to have everybody go check it out. And then if you guys do check it out, please let us know what you think.
Yeah, I definitely would love to get feedback from other readers on these books.
On our Facebook pages, or if you want to go to Books of Horror and talk about it, or if you want to put it in the comments below, we're looking for y'all to interact with us and to let us know, what you think about either the topic of that episode, or, if there's something that you would like for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Or if you're somebody whose book doesn't get talked about very much and you'd like to maybe see it out there, go ahead and put it down there. Let's check it out. Let's see what's out there. Somebody might stumble across it. You might get a new fan. So let's try and share the world of horror, one episode.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea, getting people to share their books. And I'm an equal opportunity reader. I will read pretty much anything by anybody.
Yeah, you always get at least one shot.
Yeah.
And maybe 20 years later, I'll read it again and be like, oh no, I was totally wrong. I do like it. So
yeah.
Or however you want to do it, But we give everybody a good shot here. We're just looking for quality, fun horror, and that's all that that's all we're trying to do with the show, is to show you all the different aspects that go into it. Because some people, they don't even have an idea of all the things that people have to do to get a book out there. So we
Right.
kind of like to show it, and also all the different things that can be considered horror that maybe you forgot or didn't know was horror. And that's kind of going to be interesting too.
Yeah. And for authors who may be watching this, we're also going to be doing open submissions for mostly anthologies. Up is probably what we'll end up having available.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be best if we just did the anthologies, because the book, when you try and do a submission for a full-length novel,
Yeah.
You're jumping through some hoops there. So
Yeah. So we'll have the link for the submission that I'm going to cover, the open call that I'm going to cover in the comments or in the description. The open call is for Burdizzo Books. They're based in the UK, and it is a charity anthology that is centered around school. So your story or your poem, they'll take poetry as well, should be based, around school, or it could actually be something you had written in school when you were in school. So if you have an old poem that you wrote when you were in high school, or, a short story you wrote while you were in college, those things are also accepted for submission. There's no word count limit or minimum or maximum. So just
that's
submit.
interesting. That's
Yep.
really interesting, because you never see that.
Yeah. Yeah. The only stipulation is if your submission gets selected for the anthology, they will ask you for a school photo of yourself to put in the book, because it's based around school. They're looking for anything really, sci-fi, horror, bizarro, anything. The only thing they're not really looking for is extreme. They don't want anything too extreme.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's school age stuff, you don't really want to mix the two. I get that.
Yeah.
But you still like a good ass little bit of horror.
Yeah.
Right in there. So
we'll put their like we said, a link to the open call, so you can go and check out everything, or get the contact information for either Matthew Cash or Emma Dehaney. They're the ones that own Burdizzo Books. So you can check that out. I believe the deadline is August 31st of 2022.
Okay.
So we do have quite some time.
Say, what we'll do is we'll leave these links every episode after we discuss it until they're gone, and then we'll pull them. That way if you come across it in an episode later, if you see it in the links, they're still open up to that day. You can check them out, and we'll do that until like I said, until they're past the date, and then we'll pull them.
Yep. Good idea. So I guess that's it. We can end this episode unless there's anything else you have, Eric, that you want to.
I think that covers the first the book, and then next week when we do the next episode, we're going to look at Hellraiser and compare it to the book and see if maybe the differences, some of the similarities, and also which one maybe had a bigger influence on the genre itself, which I have a feeling we're going to come to the conclusion of the movie, but after seeing all the stupid covers, but we'll go from there and see what we can see differently, see what's inside the box next week with the movies.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody, and we will see what's in the box next week.